They're firing people just for the sake of firing people. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I mean, they fired some people on Friday night at the CDC, and then they rehired them the next day because they realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe we do want to have this expert on measles on board. I mean, it's pure destruction for destruction's sake. There's no rationale to it. And, I don't really think that there's a direction to what Trump is thinking about it. I mean, we saw the 2019 shutdown.
Just when it seems like politics can't get any messier, George Conway strolls in and flips the entire room upside down straight inside Trump's personal life. Not rumors, not whispers, but eyebrow-raising details that make you stop, squint, and ask, wait, did he really just say that? This isn't policy. This isn't strategy. This is marriage drama with front row seats. And somehow it's all unfolding in public. Stick around, this spirals fast.
Oh, I definitely think that it's one reason. I mean, what we have here isn't traditional conservatism. It isn't traditional republicanism. It is authoritarianism. But I think a better word for it, as I think about it, one that more people can understand, is gangsterism, thuggism. We don't have Ronald Reagan anymore. We have Tony Soprano. He's holding people up, threatening them, bullying them, doing things that are beyond his legal power to do.
Before we move on, smash that like button and subscribe, because you already know you don't want to miss this one. The silence didn't fade quietly. It shattered like a plate slipping off a marble countertop. 1 second, everything looked polished, controlled, rehearsed. The next, George Conway wandered in, like someone who forgot this was meant to be a quiet dinner party, not a live demolition.
Like his malignant narcissist, they don't go away. And they don't really, he's just not going to all of a sudden behave himself because he suffered an election loss. If anything, he's going to double down on everything he does. And if anything, I think for 2026, we're going to see an increasing danger that he's going to try to, in some way, sabotage those elections, or at the end of the day, maybe even ignore them.
And suddenly, the focus wasn't rallies, indictments, or cable news shouting matches. It was a marriage, the famously mysterious, heavily stage-managed, emotionally encrypted marriage, one that always felt less like a partnership and more like two people accidentally booked into the same luxury hotel suite by competing PR teams.
It's extortion, and it is basically just pitiful capitulation. And I would say to these law firms that have capitulated, or the ones that are actively considering capitulating, and I know there's at least one. First of all, you're ruining your own reputation. Secondly, you're betraying your profession, your professional oath. Thirdly, you are betraying your country because you're doing harm to your country, because you're creating the impression that this administration cannot be fought for all of the illegalities that we've been talking about.
Right. Conway didn't arrive waving documents or dropping secret recordings. He didn't need to. He simply leaned into what everyone had already noticed but politely pretended not to see. The awkward distance, the public stiffness, the way affection appeared only when the camera demanded it. Like a rented smile pulled out of storage.
And so I think you're just going to see a lot of Republicans kind of treading water, a little defiance here and there, but you're going to see a lot of people just say, throw in the towel. And I don't think I don't expect too much from congressional Republicans. I mean, the two things that we should have learned by now over the last 7 or 8 years of Trump is that Trump, doesn't go away. He doesn't quit. And the Republicans have no spine.
And once that door opened, there was no closing it again, because when someone who used to be inside the circle starts casually rearranging the narrative furniture, people stop scrolling. What made it delicious wasn't cruelty. It was familiarity. Conway spoke like someone who knew exactly where the emotional light switches were, and which ones hadn't worked in years. Suddenly, the marriage stopped looking like a glossy campaign accessory and started resembling a long-term business merger that had lost its original purpose but never bothered to dissolve. The audience didn't need explicit claims. Public appearances felt contractual. Celebrations looked scheduled. And intimacy, if it existed at all, carried the energy of two coworkers, awkwardly sharing an elevator after a tense HR meeting. Conway didn't invent this. He simply pointed at it with the confidence of someone who knew nobody could honestly deny it anymore. He didn't accuse. He didn't speculate wildly. He just connected dots that were already blinking neon. And once those dots connected, the picture wasn't romantic. It was transactional, carefully curated, mutually beneficial. In the same way corporate sponsorships are mutually beneficial.
That scares people. It makes people pay protection money. We see Harvard possibly knuckling under to pay $500 million. We see these chip makers who are essentially saying, okay, take money from us. And we see the intimidation of people who have had the courage, like Miles, to speak out and criticize the president. And there is no limit to how low he will go and what he will do to intimidate and to threaten and to assert power over things. I mean, the only issue...
What really set people off wasn't the content itself. It was the timing. This wasn't whispered in some forgotten interview or buried in a footnote. It landed right as Trump's public life was already wobbling under legal trouble, political chaos, and the kind of pressure that makes even the strongest brands start peeling at the edges. Suddenly, the idea that home life wasn't a sanctuary, but another performance stage, felt less like gossip and more like context. The internet, naturally, did not handle this with restraint. People didn't debate whether Conway was right. They debated how long everyone else had been pretending he wasn't. Memes appeared within minutes. Conway didn't have to mock it. Reality did that for him. The public image had always leaned on unity, the loyal spouse, the elegant presence, the silent strength. But Conway cracked that image not by attacking it head-on, but by quietly suggesting it was more prop than pillar.
Punishing people because the president is a convicted felon and is angry that he was almost brought to justice, and he wants to inflict harm on the government, and also his people he wants to inflict harm on our legal system, and he also wants to deter people from fighting back to all the illegal things he's doing. And when you capitulate to him, you are encouraging them to send more people to El Salvador, including potentially American citizens.
And once that suggestion landed, every stiff wave, every forced smile, every moment of visible detachment suddenly read differently. It reframed old footage. It recontextualized past moments. That famous lack of hand-holding stopped, feeling quirky, and started looking symbolic. The separate arrivals, the icy body language, the way warmth never seemed to linger longer than the shutter, speed of a camera, it all became evidence without anyone needing to say the word evidence. What made call out especially effective was his tone. Didn't sound bitter. He sounded done, like someone who had reached the end of pretending and decided honesty was less exhausting. That tone carries weight. It doesn't scream, it shrugs. And shrugs can be devastating, of course. Defenders rushed in immediately. They insisted privacy should matter. They argued that marriages are complicated. But once something stops being ignored out loud, it stops being ignorable. This is where the humor sharpens. Because Trump built an empire on controlling narratives, on naming things before others could, on framing reality loudly enough that quieter interpretations never stood a chance.
I think Donald Trump is it's crazy to think this, but he is the glue that holds the Republican Party together by fear and animus. And as he becomes weaker, and as they perceive him to become weaker, there's going to be more struggles among the people beneath him, because those are people who really, fundamentally lack character, and they don't have any loyalty other than to themselves, and what drives them is fear of Trump and the grift. And as Trump becomes weaker, they will be fighting amongst themselves for what remains of Trump.
But Conway didn't challenge the narrative with volume. He did it with casual clarity, and that's harder to fight. You can't yell down someone who's calmly pointing at the obvious. You can't spin your way out of body language. You can't unsee a vibe. And the vibe around that marriage has always been distant, cordial, carefully managed, like two people fulfilling roles they agreed to long ago. Neither seems eager to rewrite the contract. As the conversation spread, the focus shifted from scandal to symbolism. What does it say about someone who demands loyalty from millions but appears to negotiate it at home? What does it reveal about authenticity when the most personal relationship looks the most rehearsed? Those questions lingered, not because Conway demanded answers, but because he made them unavoidable. And that's the real punchline. Not the marriage itself, but what it represents. The idea that the most carefully marketed man in modern politics would also have the most carefully marketed marriage feels inevitable. In hindsight, Conway didn't expose something shocking. He exposed something perfectly consistent. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was corrosive, slowly eating away at the illusion that everything behind the scenes was solid.
Get around it is he focuses on something else for a little while, and then maybe you can be left alone for a bit. And that's the problem here is people are doing this, are fighting back or not fighting back because they're behaving like they're in silos. The only way this stops is if people all get together, people of different stripes, people who are in industry, people who are in politics, people who are in universities get together and say, enough. None of us are going to give in to this.
And in politics, illusion is currency. Once it weakens, everything attached to it starts looking negotiable. What makes this episode linger is that it wasn't a scandal with a deadline. No statement fixes it. No interview smooths it over, because you can't unsee what people have already been noticing for years. Conway simply gave it a name and walked away. And maybe that's why it hit so hard. Because it wasn't dramatic. It was mundane. It suggested that the most powerful man in the room might go home to a relationship. That feels more like a ceasefire than a romance. That the bravado might fade the moment the cameras shut off. Because once the illusion thinned, people started noticing how carefully choreographed everything had always been. The entrances, the exits, the way warmth appeared on cue and vanished the moment the cameras drifted away. It wasn't cold, exactly. It was professionalism, and nothing kills romance faster than professionalism. Conway's comments lingered because they didn't feel like an attack from the outside. They felt like a note left on the counter by someone who knew where the spare keys were. Kept, that's what rattled people. This wasn't speculation from a distance. It was familiarity, speaking softly, almost politely, while casually unraveling a story that had been carefully packaged for years, and suddenly, Trump's cultivated image of control started colliding with an inconvenient question. If everything is so dominant, so commanding, so unshakable, why does the most personal partnership look like it's held together by non-disclosure agreements and polite spacing? Why does the body language scream formal dinner instead of shared life? These weren't questions anyone needed Conway to invent. He just reminded people they were allowed to ask them. The comedy sharpened when defenders tried to spin it as strength. The idea that emotional distance was somehow a power move. Look at real intimacy. Familiar glances, unscripted moments. By contrast, the Trump marriage always looked like it was waiting for approval from a stage manager before relaxing, and Conway didn't say that outright. He didn't have to. He let the audience arrive there on their own, which somehow made it worse. Now,
I don't really think that there's a direction to what Trump is thinking about it. I mean, we saw the 2019 shutdown. The 2019 shutdown was because he didn't ask for enough money for the wall, and people got mad at him for not asking for enough money for the wall, so they pulled the plug on a deal his people had agreed to, and then because he had lost the midterms, he ended up getting less for the wall than he asked for and shut the government down to get. I mean, none of this is ever going to make any sense because it's Trump. And then we have people like the Roosevelts of the world who are basically using it to carry out their, 40-year-long ambition.
What followed was a strange kind of public re-evaluation. Old interviews felt different. Past appearances looked stiffer in retrospect. Moments that once passed as reserved now felt strategic. Even the silences started to sound louder. And in politics, silence is rarely empty. It's usually full of calculations. The irony, Trump has always thrived on chaos. He bends it, weaponizes it, rides it like a signature move. But this wasn't chaotic. This was controlled exposure. A slow drip of realization that didn't trigger outrage, just recognition. And then there was the timing again. Always the timing. While Trump fought battles on every front, legal, political, reputational, the idea that his personal life might not be a refuge, but another performance layer added weight. It suggested exhaustion.
Classic Donald Trump. Cares about nobody, nothing other than himself. It's all about him. Doesn't matter whether people got hurt or are going to get hurt. On January 6th, it didn't matter that his vice president, who'd been loyal to him for 3.5 years or 4 years, might be in danger. He doesn't care. He's a sociopath. And that's just more evidence of that man, of Donald Trump's sickness, a sickness that we can't allow, as Liz Cheney put it so well this week. I mean, we can't allow a man completely lacking in compassion and decency to be president.
The kind that doesn't show up in speeches but seeps into posture. Conway didn't need to say the word tired. The implication did it for him. What made the situation almost surreal was how predictable the response was. Silence from Trump. No direct engagement. No denial worth remembering. Just the usual refusal to dignify the conversation, but ignoring something only works when people aren't already leaning in. By that point, they were. Because once the idea lodged itself that the marriage was more an arrangement than romance, everything else started lining up neatly around it. The public persona, a way of seeing relationships as assets, as optics, as leverage, and when that lens snaps into place, the marriage stops being private and starts feeling like a case study. The laughter came from the absurdity of it all. A man who built a brand on winning, dominance, and charisma, presiding over a marriage that radiated the emotional energy of a quarterly performance review. The jokes wrote themselves. Reality had already done the setup.
We can't fireproof that from happening in the sense that we can't keep him from trying to do whatever crazy thing he's going to do. But I think it's important that people not let up. People who are in opposition to Trump need to continue to go out and have more No Kings rallies and continue to organize people to vote and continue to speak out when the Republicans try to impact the elections, as they have been trying to do with redistricting and other, and we're also going to hear a lot more about various efforts in the states to monitor elections.
There was still something oddly restrained about Conway's approach. He didn't gloat. He didn't push. He didn't try to go viral. He just let the moment breathe. And that restraint gave his words credibility. It felt less like revenge and more like resignation, like someone who had watched a story play out and finally decided pretending was pointless. That resignation is dangerous in public discourse. Anger can be dismissed. Sarcasm can be waved off. But calm acknowledgement sticks. It seeps in. It forces people to sit with it. As the days passed, the conversation didn't explode. It settled, and that was worse. A life built so heavily on optics that even love looked staged. Conway didn't have to accuse Trump of anything scandalous. He simply highlighted how unromantic the whole thing appeared.
Well, I think litigation is one point. I mean, I think that, there's litigation still going on. A trial has been going on this week about what the administration did in California with the California National Guard. That is not settled yet. I think there's going to be a lot of litigation about that, but I also think it's important that people understand why it is that this kind of federal overreach is bad. And it's bad because it consolidates power in a federal government. And as Americans, we have never wanted that to happen.
And the real danger of narcissistic sociopaths like this man, like coming into office, they create a permission structure for other people to be their worst selves. We all have choices every day on whether to do right or to do wrong, or to speak a lie or to tell the truth. And he gives everybody permission to do the very worst things because they look and say, well, if he can do it and I'm with him.
For someone who markets success as glamour, that's a quiet disaster. The strangest part, none of this required new information. It was all already there. Years of footage, years of moments, years of subtle cues easy to ignore until someone said, hey, maybe we should stop ignoring this. Conway didn't open the door. He pointed out it was already open, and that's why the story refuses to die. Once an idea shifts, it never fully goes back. Trump may continue projecting strength, certainty, and command, but now there's a footnote trailing that projection, a quiet reminder that the loudest performances often hide the most carefully managed silences. George Conway didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He didn't even linger. He just nudged the curtain and let everyone see the ropes. And once you see the ropes, the magic trick never works the same.